I'm a writer, I'm a narrative designer, I'm extremely nervous, and I'm the co-founder of a little narrative development company called Sweet Baby Inc. We do narrative development in games and kind of beyond, and we try to bring a lot of inclusion, diversity, and new ideas kind of to the industry. If you're a creative working in AAA, which I did for many, many years, put this stuff up to your higher-ups, and if they don't see the value in what you're asking for when you ask for consultants, when you ask for research, go have a coffee with your marketing team and just terrify them with the possibility of what's going to happen if they don't give you what you want.
Many of you have probably seen this clip before, but I think those 50 seconds or so summarize the issue I want to talk about today better than anything. For those who haven't seen the clip before, the lovely individual in this video was Kim Belair, CEO and co-founder of Sweet Baby Inc., who became unfavorably famous overnight when she made this outrageous remark. If they don't see the value in what you're asking for when you ask for consultants, go have a coffee with your marketing team and just terrify them with the possibility of what's going to happen if they don't give you what you want. Sweet Baby Inc. describes itself as a Canadian narrative development and consultation studio which consults on video game narratives during development to promote, and here it comes, diversity, equity and inclusion, DEI for short, within game narratives and studios. They are mainly consisting of former Ubisoft employees, which, even if you didn't know anything else about the company, should be a massive red flag, considering how shit of a company Ubisoft has been over the last decade. They have worked on some titles that you may recognize from the recent past, such as Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Gotham Knights, God of War Ragnarok, Marvel's Spider-Man 2, Alan Wake 2 or Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. Now you can probably already anticipate where we are going with this, but we will come back to Sweet Baby Inc. a bit later in the video. So anyway, what I'm really trying to get at here is the fact that we've recently seen a lot of discussions and controversy around identity politics in gaming and how it supposedly contributed to the failings of some really major titles like Concord, Sony Entertainment's latest shooter, which saw less than 700 concurrent players on its servers at launch. Or take Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, which at least managed to debut with more than 13,000 players, but still managed to lose the studio more than $200 million. Or take Dustborn, which peaked at just 83 players. And as many of you are probably well aware, the list just goes on. Star Wars Outlaws, Assassin's Creed Shadows, Dragon Age the Veilguard, yes, Veilguard, or Avowed, all very expensive productions in the hundreds of millions of dollars and very recent games that have all earned a lot of criticism for being woke, losing millions and upsetting players. There are of course those people out there who do claim that these recent failures have nothing to do with DEI and that wokeness is just a term used by evil conservatives to try and suppress progressive and inclusive ideas. But I think it has become painfully obvious to many that DEI has had a negative impact on many Western games and studios more broadly, and that we can't just sweep it under the rug. Now I'm well aware I'm probably a bit late to the party on this one, but I feel like there have been a lot of videos recently jumping on the hype train of hating woke to generate easy clicks and stir up emotions. I think for many this is just an easy and obvious way to cash in on some hype and make an easy buck. But I'm not getting the feeling that many understand the issue at a deeper level and genuinely care about why this is happening and how it might be solved. And very few actually manage to capture the inherently destructive nature of wokeness and DEI. So today, I want to try and fix that, and take a deep dive into the subject of wokeness and identity politics in gaming. We'll take a more systematic approach and explore its history, present and its impact, and why it is such a big problem in the gaming industry, and what this might mean for the future. So let's go! Now, to explain why this whole discussion around wokeness and identity politics is even a thing and why it is a problem, I think it would be best to start at the beginning, by establishing a solid foundation, a clear definition of these terms and where they come from. The first thing we really have to address is that wokeness can mean totally different things depending on who you ask. If you go to the Cambridge Dictionary, it will tell you that it's a state of being aware, especially of social problems such as racism and inequality. Sounds pretty good, right? who could possibly be in favor of racism and inequality. But of course, if you now asked more critical people of the word woke and the movement as a whole, you would get something more like this. It's a movement that prioritizes progressive leftist politics, virtue signaling, imposes ideological conformity, and injects unnecessary political narratives into areas like entertainment, education, and workplace policies, alienating audiences or participants and fostering division rather than unity. By those people, and I will be completely honest here and say I include myself in this list, it is viewed as a threat when it undermines creativity, freedom of thought, and apolitical engagement. But where does the word even come from? Let's put it in some historical context. Woke as a term has actually been around since the 1930s, when it was mainly used as an alert for Black Americans, almost like a cautious warning. Be aware, or woke, of racially motivated threats and potential dangers, especially from the police. But the term, as it is mainly used today, really started gaining traction in 2014 during the famously mostly peaceful Ferguson protests following the tragic fatal shooting of Michael Brown by a police officer and the following emergence of the BLM movement. The term was then quickly adopted by progressive leftists in the US, with its meaning being expanded to a political ideology centered on progressive social justice issues such as systemic racism, gender identity, and intersectionality. However, over time it evolved into a broader cultural phenomenon, encompassing issues like white privilege, reparations for slavery, and systemic racism and critiques of capitalism. While many progressives view it as a call for awareness and activism, critics began using the term woke ironically and derogatory, signifying what some see as excessive political correctness or ideological rigidity. So essentially, we ended up in this weird space with two extremes. One side claiming woke is about spearheading social justice causes, fighting all the oppression and injustices in the world, and the other side sees it as a precursor to harmful socialist or Marxist ideology that aims to brainwash people and destroy Western society. Sounds pretty grim, right? So now that we've established a baseline understanding of the meaning of wokeness and where it comes from, let's bring it back to gaming and how it has impacted the industry in recent times. While it's hard to pinpoint when exactly woke gaming emerged as a theme, it's fair to assume it coincided with the MeToo movement that started in 2006 and was then further fueled by BLM in 2014, as we already discussed, and of course we must not forget Gamergate, which also coincidentally happened in 2014. Now, for those of you who don't really remember all the details, here's a quick summary. Gamergate essentially started with accusations by a number of women in the gaming journalism space of co-workers and bosses and their unethical behavior, including claims of sexual harassment and exploitation. Although the initial accusations were quickly debunked as having no evidence, the floodgates were now open for the progressive left and identity politics, and the controversy quickly spiraled into a much larger campaign about ethics, sexism, racism, etc. in gaming more generally. This was then further fueled by forums like 4chan, then Twitter and Reddit, who tried to frame their movement as a fight against systemic problems in the gaming industry and demanding investigations into the allegations, better ethical standards, transparency, and corruption. So if I had to pick a point in time when woke really started to manifest itself in gaming, it would have to be 2014, when this explosive cocktail of MeToo, BLM, and Gamergate all merged into this big shitstorm. Suddenly, gaming was catapulted into the spotlight of mainstream media. The aftermath of Gamergate brought increased scrutiny to workplace culture across the industry, which exposed widespread issues of misconduct, harassment, and toxicity at major studios. Over the following years, several high-profile cases revealed deeply rooted problems, often involving senior executives at AAA studios. Some notorious examples include the lawsuit filed by California's Department of Fair Employment and Housing accused Activision Blizzard of fostering a culture of widespread sexual harassment and gender discrimination. Allegations included male employees engaging in inappropriate behavior, making crude jokes, and creating a toxic environment for women, particularly women of color. An especially notorious detail was the so-called Cosby Suite, a term used to describe a hotel room during BlizzCon that allegedly served as a hotspot for harassment. Key figures implicated included Alex Efraziabi, who was named as one of the most egregious offenders that subsequently left the company. The scandal led to mass employee protests, the resignation of Blizzard president J. Allen Bragg, and ongoing unionization efforts within the company. The outcome? Activision and Blizzard paid more than $50 million to settle allegations of systemic sexual harassment and routinely underpaying female staff. In 2018, Riot Games, mostly known of course for their games League of Legends and Valorant, faced a class action lawsuit for gender discrimination. Reports highlighted a bro culture, with allegations of harassment, inappropriate comments, and systemic discrimination against women in hiring and promotion. Sound familiar yet? The outcome? The company eventually agreed to a $100 million settlement that applied to over 1,500 women who are or were staff or contractors at the LA-based company in 2021 after years of legal battles and negative publicity. The agreement also called for Riot Games to spend more than $18 million over the next 3 years to fund DEI initiatives. And what would be a list of controversies and shitstorms without Ubisoft? In 2020, Ubisoft faced a reckoning when numerous allegations of sexual misconduct, harassment, and toxic workplace culture emerged. These allegations implicated several high-profile executives and managers, including Serge Hascoët, the chief creative officer, who was accused of enabling a toxic culture at Ubisoft. He was reportedly a central figure in creating an environment rife with harassment and bullying. Employees reported he used his influence to protect abusive colleagues and perpetuated a culture of impunity. Second, Tommy Francois, the VP of Editorial and Creative Services. Francois faced multiple allegations of inappropriate behavior, harassment, and making sexual comments toward employees. He resigned after the allegations surfaced. And third, Maxime Bellon, the VP of Editorial. Bellon was also implicated in the scandal and resigned amidst growing accusations. The outcome? In the end, 5 high-profile executive Ubisoft employees were arrested. These revelations came after years of complaints that Ubisoft's leadership had ignored or actively suppressed. While Ubisoft CEO Yves Guillemot promised reforms, including restructuring HR and a zero-tolerance policy for misconduct, follow-up reports suggested slow progress and lingering mistrust among employees. Despite several executive departures, critics argue that systemic issues remain unaddressed. In summary, I would argue that at the start of all of this, a lot of good things actually came out of these critical movements, like BLM, MeToo, Gamergate. The revelations of misconduct and toxic workplace environments at companies like Activision Blizzard, Ubisoft, and all the others not only highlighted systemic issues, but also initiated significant industry-wide changes. Employees became increasingly vocal, demanding accountability and pushing for better workplace protections. Initiatives such as the ABK Workers Alliance at Activision Blizzard emerged, advocating for actions like ending forced arbitration clauses, ensuring equitable pay, and adopting transparent hiring and firing practices. These movements prompted companies to revisit how HR departments handle complaints. Previously seen as mechanisms to shield corporations, HR teams faced intense scrutiny and were forced to adopt more employee-centric approaches. However, these changes were uneven at best across the industry, with some companies making more tangible progress than others. Simultaneously, similar to many other industries and large companies, the wave of scandals and activism also fueled the establishment and expansion of diversity, equity, and inclusion divisions across the gaming world. And I think this is where we really come full circle. What started off as a genuine attempt at fighting toxic work environments, cultures of sexual harassment, misogyny, etc., quickly started turning into something else entirely. As with any ideology, there will always be a minority of individuals who get so obsessed and so possessed by it, they are pushing it too far and it ends up absorbing their entire life and personality. As these people become more and more entangled with this toxic ideology, the more they lose all capacity for critical thinking, common sense, and rationality. And when these people then get confronted and challenged by reality, and the vast majority of people whose views are not on those extreme fringes, there's only one thing they can do: attack. attack anybody who defies them, double down on it, and shut down anyone who disagrees. Now, I would argue that gaming has always had a, if you want to call it, woke element to it, even before all those issues surfaced. Just like any other creative industry, the sector attracts highly creative individuals who, historically speaking, tend to be more on the left-leaning side in terms of politics and more progressive in their personal views than the average person. And like I've said in my previous video on why modern gaming sucks, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. In fact, I would argue we obviously want a spectrum of viewpoints as long as they are sensible. And the same goes with implementing politics of any sort into games if done right. And there are loads of titles that we can quote where this has been done right. Games like the Deus Ex series, Metal Gear Solid, BioShock, Spec Ops The Line, This War of Mine, Detroit Become Human, or even Cyberpunk 2077, and the list of course goes on. After all, this is arguably the most creative medium to ever exist. Developers with a vision can quite literally dream up entire new worlds or even galaxies, inhabited by whoever they want. If you want to learn more about this whole topic around issues in modern gaming, please feel free to check out the video up here or the link in the video description. And I know, if I haven't already lost them, there will be loads of people now arguing that this wokeness is either just made up or a mere obsession of evil conservatives and bigots who just hate trans people and minorities and all the other nonsense. But to those people I would say the following. If that is true, then how come that a game like Baldur's Gate 3, which is arguably woke as fuck by our own definition, managed to sell close to 20 million copies worldwide, winning prizes left and right, a game which is so universally admired and loved by both critics and players alike, dominating the Steam charts of 2023 as the best-selling game of the year, while a game like Dragon Age Veilguard, which in many ways I would argue is very similar to Baldur's Gate 3, completely fell flat on its face, with only 1.5 million copies sold, less than half of what they expected.
Police, get what you fucking deserve!
And just for comparison, Dragon Age Inquisition, which was released more than a decade ago, managed to sell 12 million copies. So calling Veilguard a flop is a massive understatement no matter what gaming journalism shills and mentally challenged Reddit users are trying to tell you. So please, I beg you, explain it to me. Make it make sense. They are both Western RPGs with party-based gameplay. They both have a heavy narrative focus, emphasizing deep storytelling, character choices, and player-driven dialogue. Both take place in well-established fantasy worlds. They both were in development for over 7 years. Both studios spent more than $100 million on them. And both advocate for DEI and representation, embracing diverse characters, LGBTQ romances, and other progressive themes. Could the difference be, and I know I sound crazy here, well, Baldur's Gate simply is a fantastic game, which happens to have some DEI elements built into it, while Veilguard was a DEI vanity project that tried to build a game around its identity politics. Now that's something to think about. But this is exactly what lies at the heart of the problem. It all comes down to a game's vision and design. And to explain this better, we have to take a short detour into game design and how successful games are normally created. Now you could expand on this and break it up into more steps, but for the sake of argument we will limit ourselves to looking at what I think are the most essential ones. At the start of every successful game stands the vision. This is probably the most difficult thing to get right. You need somebody who has a creative vision to begin with. This requires talent, ambition, and a feeling for what customers are craving, and I would argue this is where a lot of modern Western studios and publishers have a massive leadership deficit. You need somebody who has a story they want to bring to life, a game that will captivate its audience and make them want to buy and play your product. In order to do that, you have to ask yourself a number of core questions. 1. What is it about? Who is the audience going to be? Is there a market for the game? What is the competition like? How will it be monetized? How long will it take to develop? What is the estimated budget? A concept is developed which is agreed upon by the senior executives and other senior stakeholders like creative directors and lead creative artists. After that, the so-called Game Design Document, or GDD for short, is normally created. This is essentially the game's North Star. Its purpose is to unite everyone behind a common goal and help them understand and align with the project's greater vision. The GDD includes things like the idea and concept, the genre, story and characters, core game mechanics, gameplay, level and world design, art design, and all the rest of it. Now the next step is production. Now this is obviously where all the ideas and work from previous steps become a reality. The story is refined, assets, maps and characters are created, all the code is written, etc. There's obviously a lot more to this step in terms of prototyping, testing, refinement, and often reworks, but I don't want to go into too much detail here as it's not really essential for our topic. Lastly, of course, we have post-production. This is where marketing kicks in, promotional campaigns are planned and executed, hype is generated, and copies are finally released and shipped. Of course, this is not the end, as there are still teams who are delegated to things such as maintenance, fixing bugs, creating patches, creating extra content like microtransactions and DLCs that we all love so much. Now, with all of this in mind, we can start to answer the question of why DEI in games causes so many issues. First of all, the biggest problem is that when DEI even is a key consideration of a game, because when it is, then it usually comes in at the very top. Normally, the vision, like we discussed, of a game sets the tone for the rest of the production. Most good games have one thing in common: a coherent vision that has mass appeal to its player base, like we just identified, or introduces a new concept to attract a fresh audience. Either way, DEI should never be a consideration at this point, and this is where so many Western studios go wrong nowadays. Any remotely intelligent and consumer-focused developer starts with a vision, and everything that follows, whether that's game mechanics, characters, storyline, should logically stem from that vision. Everything in that first crucial stage should serve the vision, not the other way around. But when you now, after fostering and creating an environment for years where you have invited a bunch of DEI-obsessed progressive leftists who are hell-bent on injecting their own personal agendas and grievances into games, some of whom may have made it into the most senior layers of your organization, this whole process we discussed gets flipped on its head. Suddenly, instead of telling a compelling story, developers are forced to shoehorn in specific elements. This could be related to anything we discussed: certain races, ethnicities, genders, sexual identities, and other sensibilities. Not because they serve the game's narrative or world building, but because some self-absorbed activist in the studio demands representation. The focus is no longer on crafting a great story or making a game that people actually want to play. No, now it's all about making a tiny group of narcissistic assholes feel validated. They don't give a single shit about the game itself, only that their personal worldview is reflected in it. And if that means your medieval Japanese rural village now looks like 21st century downtown LA, well, then that's just great and something to be celebrated, right? Because it's diversity, and diversity is a virtue and must not be questioned. And I've said it before, but I'll say it again, this is why so many modern games fucking suck. Western games. The moment you prioritize DEI and identity politics of any capacity over creative vision, storytelling, and artistic coherence, your game is almost guaranteed to be a steaming pile of garbage. Why? Because it turns out almost nobody in the real world gives a shit about this woke nonsense. Identity politics is a fringe issue, a luxury belief that is mainly upheld and solely shared by a fringe minority of overprivileged middle-class white women and soy boys. The average gamer, you know, the people you're trying to sell your games to, just want a good game, a gripping story, well-written characters, a tight script, engaging mechanics, immersive worlds. No one sits down to play a game hoping to be force-fed a lecture about gender ideology or colonial guilt. Oh boy, I cannot wait for these developers to spend the next few hours telling me what a garbage human piece of shit I am for having the wrong opinions about the world, and how I should just shut the fuck up and listen to them, because they are so much smarter and better than me. It's really so ironic, because people play games to escape from the bullshit of the real world, not to be bombarded with ideological propaganda. I know this may sound extreme, but let's face it, DEI in the end is nothing more than an artificially forced purity filter that suffocates creativity, free thought and artistic innovation at its root. In our society, one which is supposed to be all about individual freedom and meritocracy, culture should emerge organically within the free marketplace of ideas, where the best and most compelling works naturally rise to the top. But no, especially in the corporate AAA space, everything has to be sanitized through an ideological lens, ensuring it meets the correct political standards before it's allowed to even exist. The result? Creative death by committee. Art that is fucking lifeless. Culture that is bland, soulless, and stale. These DEI advocates don't care about whether a game is good or bad. They only care about their own selfish, narcissistic need to see their own values and ideology represented in the game. The game becomes their political platform, and because of that, they end up poisoning the entire creative process. And I hate having to keep banging on about this, but just listen to the way some of these people talk. Not just in the gaming space, but also in music and especially in film. It's always me, my vision, my character, my representation, my experience. It's all about them. And this is why they will always fucking fail. Because nobody gives a shit about them. People care about good content. But these self-absorbed lunatics are so obsessed with themselves that they can't see they're actively destroying the very thing that they claim to love. And here's where it gets even worse. We as gamers are the ones who let these people into our studios. We gave them power. We told them their shitty ideas were brilliant. We allowed them to dictate the direction of entire projects. And we let them silence anyone who disagreed. This has created a vicious cycle where these few select individuals can now sabotage every part of the gaming industry, making it impossible to produce anything good without their approval. So what do we get? An echo chamber, where everyone thinks the same way, pushes the same narratives, and suppresses any dissenting opinions. It becomes a circle jerk, where they all pat each other on the back, reassuring themselves that they are on the right side of history, while churning out garbage that nobody actually wants to play. A prime example of this, just look at gaming journalism nowadays, an industry that has completely discredited itself over the last years. Whether it's IGN, Kotaku, GamesRadar, or Metacritic, the so-called journalists at those organizations have turned what should be a passion-driven space into a complete joke. Instead of doing their job and holding developers accountable for making bad games, they have sided with the same studios, defending them at all costs because their own financial livelihood depends on it. As a result, any criticism of a game is dismissed as bigotry, and any dissenting opinion is attacked as problematic. They gaslight players and blame them for not liking woke garbage. They tell you are the problem, that you are a racist, you are a transphobe, you are a misogynist, a fascist even, whatever bullshit label they want to slap on you to shut you up. Instead of listening to legitimate criticism and doing their job, they deflect, they insult, and they double down. Why is this happening? Well, because the same people who have infiltrated big studios are the same people who occupy the various gaming journalist websites. And they wonder why people don't trust them anymore. We could go into a lot more detail here, but I think I will make a separate video on this topic of gaming journalism, so keep an eye out for it. And I think this is really my most crucial point. The bottom line is that wokeness is actively losing the gaming industry money. Well, the Western gaming industry anyway. The vast majority of gamers, turns out, do not want this shit in their games, but many of those companies are so blinded by ideology at this point that they just ignore the audience entirely.
Put a chick in it, make her gay! Put a chick in it and make her name it gay!
Sure, yeah. Well, let's try that. Again.
Instead of making games that appeal to the people who actually buy them, I know, a crazy concept, they cater to a tiny group of angry Reddit forum weirdos who don't even fucking play games in the first place. And then, when their games inevitably bomb, they blame toxic gamers instead of their own dogshit decisions. Look at some of those recent failures. Dustborn, Forspoken, Saints Row, Concord, Marvel's Kill the Justice League, Redfall, Assassin's Creed Shadows, and of course, Veilguard. Every single one of these games pushed woke garbage over solid game design, and they all fucking flopped. And meanwhile, and to my overwhelming joy, Baldur's Gate 3, a game that, yes, has a very diverse character roster and LGBTQ romances amongst many other things, succeeded. Not because it was woke, but because it was a fucking great game first. And that's the difference. A good game doesn't shove ideology down your throat. It doesn't insult its audience or tries to guilt trip them into liking it. It simply delivers a high quality, engaging experience that players actually want. And guess what? People fucking love a good game. Because at the end of the day, that's what matters. Good games will always succeed and prevail. Woke vanity projects will always fail. And if these companies don't pull their heads out of their asses soon, they are going to start going bankrupt and become irrelevant, all because they refuse to acknowledge a simple fact. You can make a good game woke and succeed, but you cannot make a woke game good. We just want to play good games. Now we can sit here and complain and probably be able to keep the list of problems growing and growing for an eternity, but what I do think has become obvious to many of us over the past years, maybe even the past decade, is that Western AAA studios are in a bit of a pickle. Their first mistake was participating in the ongoing culture war. Gamers were perfectly happy with their video games. There was quite literally no reason whatsoever to get involved in any of this. But as we talked about it in the beginning of this video, this is exactly what happens when you invite a bunch of activists into your organization and then promote them into senior positions way above their actual level of competence. Although we did establish that there have been numerous issues that surfaced as a result of people speaking out about abuse, harassment and so on, it is obvious that the reaction to it that followed completely oversteered in the other direction. And I'll be completely honest, I genuinely even struggle to believe for even a second that these companies actually gave a shit about their employees' complaints. I personally feel that all these HR and DEI initiatives to make workplaces more inclusive and safe, and all those other punch words were mainly just an attempt by those same organizations to polish their public image and make themselves look better. The problem, of course, as it turns out, is that nobody outside their little elite woke echo chamber actually gave a shit about identity politics and gaming. But now they were stuck with these toxic activists who they invited into the fold, and we have had to suffer the consequences ever since. I really only see one way out of this for Western studios, and it's going to be painful and suck for a lot of people. But if they want to stop themselves from going bust, I don't see any other way than firing all those people and canning all the projects that they've been working on. Especially with the insanely rapidly increasing quality of Eastern Studios games like Black Myth Wukong, Genshin Impact, Elden Ring, Final Fantasy XVI, Monster Hunter Wilds, and so forth. I don't see how Western studios are supposed to survive against this storm of good games. Chinese and Japanese studios are not getting bogged down by Western sensibilities, identity politics, DEI, this whole ridiculous discussion around representation of racial or sexual minorities, implementing leftist politics into every fiber of every game. Ironically, they're just focused on the things that matter, making good games, engaging games, strong storytelling, strong characters, strong plots, strong dialogues. And all of that for a fraction of the completely overblown budgets and development cycles of many Western studios. And I want to be empathetic and feel sorry for Western developers who have nothing to do with any of this, but I'm just finding it so hard not to laugh, because it's all completely self-inflicted pain. Nobody forced any of these Western studios to jump on the woke bandwagon and inject their games with this identity politics nonsense. But what puts the cherry on top of all of this is the fact that the very same people whose entire livelihood depends on you liking and buying their games are the very same people who have spent the last decade actively demonizing you for all your wrong opinions, pushing you further and further away from them. Let's just pause here for a second and think about how ridiculous all of this really is. First, publishers, game studios, gaming journalists, they all demonize you and tell you that, well, maybe the game is just not for you, and if you don't like it, don't buy it. Journalists falling over themselves to defend and protect the very same studios, paying them to write favorable reviews and inviting them to private events, pre-release testing, etc. Then you don't buy their games, just like they asked, and then when you don't buy their games, following their advice, they insult you again for not buying their games because now you're an evil racist, a transphobe, a homophobe, a garbage human being, and the downward spiral continues. Like, I don't know, how do we live in a world where comments like this from former Kotaku and IGN editor Kate MacDonald are considered completely normal, calling for developers and publishers to condemn everyone opposing woke ideology? Like, how pathetic is this? Or this one, calling people who make a list of perceived woke games literal Nazis. I really struggle to sympathize with any of these companies at this point that I know are now going to go bust. Like dominoes, one after the other. They deserve it. I'm not sorry about it. I do feel sorry for the employees who have not been involved in any of this crazy movement, but at the same time, maybe you should have spoken up while you still had the chance. In all honesty, and I'm speaking to these companies directly now, you have to get rid of these people. This pathetic push for identity politics has caused nothing but trouble for any of you, and has made everyone's gaming experience worse. It has to stop. Unless you want to be bought out by a bunch of Korean, Chinese, or Japanese studios over the next years, I suggest you start making good games again. And let's be honest, this isn't rocket science. It wasn't 10 years ago that studios still knew what made a good game. Red Dead Redemption 2, 2010, Mass Effect 2, 2010, Skyrim, 2011, Arkham City, 2011, Dishonored, 2012, The Last of Us, 2013, GTA 5, Dragon Age Inquisition, and so many other games. This is clearly not a question of a lack of talent or ability. It's a matter of choice. When faced with such strong international competition, you have to bring back the fundamentals of meritocracy and make good games again. Studios, in my opinion, also need to work hard to rebuild and regain their reputation, the respect of their core audience. They need to stop listening to loud minorities and ditch the Western echo chambers, prioritizing fun and player engagement above all else. This gaslighting needs to stop. Journalists and publishers have to stop blaming their audiences for their own shitty games and commercial failures. Nobody wants Western studios to vanish, but we do expect good games and we do not accept being bullied and demonized by a bunch of narcissistic activists. Accept that quality matters. Nobody gives a shit about your political agenda. Nobody plays a game to be lectured for hours on end about how awful they are. Games are supposed to be about escapism, the ability to dive into a fantastical world for a bit and have fun. At the end of the day, the market decides. Bad games fail and good games succeed. I know to many Western publishers this may sound crazy, but I promise you it's true. And if you do feel the need to insert politics into your games, then at least do it in a way that isn't insulting the player's intelligence and makes them feel like this is the most cringe shit they've ever played. At the end of the day, the truth is what I've said earlier. You can make a good game woke and succeed, but you cannot make a woke game good. We gamers are simple creatures. Just make good games and we will happily buy them and forgive you. But if you keep insulting and treating us like garbage while still expecting us to buy your products, then sorry, but then you more than deserve to vanish from the face of the earth. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more videos like this, please consider leaving a like, comment and subscribe to the channel to get notified when a new video is uploaded. I apologize that it has been so long since my last upload, but life has been surprisingly busy. I sincerely thank you for taking some of your precious time out of your busy day to watch this video, and I hope to see you again soon. Peace out, keep gaming, and bye bye.